All right, we have a few people trickling in here. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here in a second, but as we get started, give us just a few more minutes. We'll let people continue to trickle in. And thanks again for hopping on. Awesome. As but a few more people hop on, we're going to give it another minute or two as we wait for some more people to join. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here now. Can you guys see Stan and Madison? You guys can see the presentation, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just double checking here.
Yeah, looks good.
All right, we're going to give it just a few more minutes. Sorry, probably one or two more minutes, and we'll kick it off. Awesome, seeing some familiar names in here. Excited to have everyone here with us. Let's go ahead and kick off introductions and kind of get started. We're going to have an awesome group of an awesome conversation today. So thank you so much for joining us. This is brought to you by Spiff and GetAccept. We won't go into too much on those. If you have questions, we know a few people who can answer those for you, but just excited to have this topic, excited to talk to New Year's resolutions or New Year's solutions and 5 ways to start 2022 right. So before we get into this, we have a few things we're going to go over as kind of housekeeping items. But today's discussion is we're going to talk about motivating teams, goal setting, preventing setting and forgetting goals, accountability, and improving visibility and the benefits that has to you, your team, and to really your whole organization. And with that, we're actually going to kick off an initial poll that everyone can take a few seconds here to fill out while we're introducing our panelists today. In that poll, I think Lauren's going to be kicking this off now. Have you set a work-related resolution this year? Please, if you can, hop in there, fill it out so we can get some cool numbers to kind of help guide us here at the beginning. Real quick, again, before we get into introductions, a few housekeeping items. If you have a question, please drop it in there in the chat. We have Lauren from the Spiff team who is here helping us answer those and make sure that we address those here. We want this, even though it's a webinar format, we want it to be as conversational and as much of a learning experience for you as we can possibly make it. So if you have a question, please don't hesitate to drop that in there, either in the Q&A or the chat. We'll be watching both of them, whatever is easiest for you. And at the end here, we will leave time for Q&A. So just let us know. And again, we'll do our best to address questions as they come in. But again, who we'll have on here today? Myself, I'll be running as the kind of the mediator here, the host. My name is Tanner Lacey. I'm one of the co-founders at Spiff. I leave it at co-founder because I do quite a few random other things. Stan can attest. Mostly focus on the go-to-market strategic side and partnerships, but been at Spiff now for 4.5 years, and it's been an awesome ride. So then let's kick it to Madison here to introduce herself, and then Stan, if you wouldn't mind doing that, follow up Madison there.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Madison Simon. I've been working at GetAccept for a little over 3 years. Started as an SDR BDR, and then I was a solutions engineer, and now as senior solutions engineer, which is just a fancy name for a technical account executive. So I'm going to be representing all the account executive personas out there and offering kind of the perspective of us people in that role and engaging with Stan from his perspective.
Thanks, Madison. So Stan James, I run sales at Spiff, and Tanner is more than what he claims to be. He is Swiss Army knife, and appreciate all he does. But I've been on-prem SaaS for over 20 years, and I actually appreciate Madison representing that view and representing the persona. I'm going to be doing the same thing from a leadership perspective and having hopefully a great conversation around some insights and things that I've been thinking about that I think many of you will as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Madison. And excited to be on here with you guys today. So let's go ahead and we got maybe just a couple more seconds here to let people answer the poll again. If you haven't already hopped in there and thrown on an answer, please do. Excited to be learning from this today. We're going to get some awesome perspectives from individual like from Madison. I mean, your experience as an individual contributor is also a leader and what you've seen in the industry. And Stan, I mean, you've been around for a minute, right? So we're going to get some sage advice, as well as Stan's doing an incredible job over here at Spiff, leading our sales team. So, all right, Lauren, let's go ahead and close up that poll, and let's take a look at what we're seeing here as the answer. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen as well. Okay, so with the resolutions, have you set a work-related resolution this year? Yes, and it's going super well. 33% thought about it, but haven't acted on them. 53%, what resolutions? 13%. This is I mean, more or less kind of what I thought would come through. Thank you for the people who humored us with the what resolutions there, because I may or may not have tried to click that one. Stan, Madison, anything stand out to you there?
I mean, it's kind of to be expected. I went through the new year OKR goal setting with my boss and co-founder, and we went really heavy on setting some great OKRs, and now business is picking up. So I understand why there are probably some people who've started to fall off in that regard. So.
Yeah, and I would just say generally looking forward to the goal setting conversation when we dig into it. Sales is pretty easy. You have your revenue metric. Well, it's not easy to do. It's just the metrics and how our tasks and in general goals are set. It's based on the company revenue number, and then obviously the leading indicators and such that lead up to that. What was really interesting for me personally, similar to what Madison just described, is our company as well went through OKRs, and it was really intriguing and interesting to go through that process, because I was able to witness and see the collaboration with other departments where they had certain objectives and goals that lined up in many ways with sales, and that collaboration allowed me to help in certain areas that aligned well with the overall company structure and goal setting. So looking forward to diving deeper into it, but it was what a great process that was for Spiff earlier on as well. It's fun to go through.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I totally agree. I mean, obviously I was in those meetings with Stan, and I think one thing that's been interesting, right, that I'd love to maybe kick us off with is we're kind of going on year 2 of remote work. Madison, you guys are completely remote now as well, right? I GetAccept.
Oh yeah, if
Okay.
you can't tell, I'm in a co-working call booth right now. And we've been completely remote since, that day in March of 2020 when they announced everyone needs to quarantine, and people are all scattered now throughout.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Cool. So I mean, we're really similar at Spiff. Like we have a good chunk of people that are around Salt Lake City, Utah, but like at this point, probably 60% of our company is not. So I think we're both kind of in the same boat here. But curious, on year 2, how are you guys feeling about motivating your remote teams? I know last year was probably a learning scenario for you. Like, what are you implementing this year to try to keep your teams motivated? And Stan, maybe or maybe yourself as well, yourself and your team's motivated. So Stan, I'll kick it to you first and get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think when I thought about the topic and the questions that we had, it's a complete shift from what I experienced 2 years ago. And I'm actually going to go take it back to 2020 and think about just the overall stress that a revenue leader has, and then having to do it remotely. There's just a different set of circumstances that we're dealing with, as sales leaders. And so I was thinking a little bit about that. There's just new challenges. There's a stronger need. I think there's a stronger need for better communication skills, and maybe even better than that, soft communication, general problem solving, just keeping the motivational factor in play. A good mentor and friend of mine I used to work with used the analogy of a duck on water, where on top, it's calm and collect, but underneath the legs are moving 100 miles a minute. And so I think as sales leaders, from that perspective, it's really important to you can be stressed, but to show the stress, your team will feel it, and they may mirror that. And so being calm and collect and really understand how you as a leader impact the team is really critical. because they're, again, doing this remote is certainly harder than being in an office, in my opinion, because you have teams that are naturally aligned to being in an office. SDRs seem to have a higher cadence in process where they're collaborating a lot more, and then you kind of go up the chain from SMB to mid to enterprise, and it's varies per team and per individual. But I do think it's really important to engage and be in a good place personally. And again, when I think about motivating a rep and just being motivated as a sales leader, my biggest thing is my wellness and my ability to handle the stress. And if I'm not in a good place, there's a whole conversation we could probably go into on this topic. But generally, I need to be in a good place so that I can convey that same confidence and rhythm with my team across the board. So, there are going to be ebbs and flows in every business, and we certainly had some last year. But just having that consistency is really critical as a leader, because your example and how you're processing difficult situations is being closely watched.
Yeah. I would, I agree with that. It's very important for leaders to set a good example in terms of how they keep their cool in tough situations, or how they create a space of celebration and inclusion through tough times and things of that sort. And it is challenging when we're all remote. One thing that is inevitable is that there's losses in sales. And when you're in a team environment, when I'm having a losing day and my coworker is there, it's a lot easier to pick myself up and keep going. Or I'm having a losing day and my boss is like, hey, let's figure out how to get through this. It's a lot easier. So I think one thing that really helps me working remote is keeping this culture of sharing successes with the team and having my leader really facilitate that. So if I'm maybe not celebrating much, I can at least hop on the bandwagon with a colleague who is celebrating something, and it keeps the morale going, and it keeps us all connected and collaborative as well.
I love that. Or go ahead. Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I think in preparation for this, I found this really interesting summary from Sales Hacker, where they're polling remote employees, and they said three things are top of mind for us as leaders and as contributors in general. One is just unplugging after work. Some of us just work too long, and we're going to get into burnout in just a minute, but that's a big thing. They talked about feeling lonely or isolated from our network, our peers, and then just overall communication. And all those factors play into, when we talk about, okay, so what do we do about it? And I don't know, Tanner, if we want to go into that just yet, but happy to kind of lead into that, or if we want to kind of noodle on this topic for a minute longer, I'm happy to kind of.
I think let's keep rolling with where we're going. I like the conversation, so let's keep it rolling.
So when I think about, so what do we do about it? Some of the suggestions, and again, what comes top of mind for me is, I kind of see our team and the folks that I work with. I mean, they're such key assets to an organization, our most important assets. So how do we help each other? How do I help myself in getting to a place of having that confidence and that cadence that we are looking for to create a predictable, repeatable engine? I have 4 kids, and I would say it attributes to each in a way. Each person that we work with is similar in my analogy to my kids. Every kid's different. I can look at one kid and enough said. They just give them that look and it's done. Another kid, you kind of have to, I don't literally hit them with the stick, but figuratively hit them over with the stick, because they just don't get it until they're feeling it. And, I think there has to be some consistency, but we have to acknowledge that every rep is different in terms of what their needs are, and being able to understand what their interests are and what they care about, and getting really personal in a way where you can understand what is valuable to them and helping them in their development, not just as a career, but just personally. I think that really helps in the remote scenario. Being flexible in this remote environment that we're in, and just generally as in startup land, like if we're not able to have the flexibility and just have that adaptability by nature, it's going to be a real struggle. And that comes, in my mind, not just from where we are today, but everyone you bring in, and it's different for each stage of business, at least that I've been part of. A startup world is just different, and hiring to that persona, I think, is really key so they understand, hey, this is what you're getting into. Are you in it with us? And then having that vision certainly helps with the overall desire to avoid the burnout. The second thing that came to mind was just connecting, and there are different ways. And this is an area I personally am trying to get better at, but it could be like Zoom lunches, and it could be weekly offsites. It could be copy sessions. But some of my leaders do book clubs, and it's been really successful. And then the last thing that comes to mind is, and this is also something that I'm still working on, but it's leading with empathy, and having patience and really seeking to understand before you kind of hit it hard, getting both sides of the equation. I often ask myself this question: does my team perceive me as a manager, or does my team perceive me as a leader? And if it's a manager, I've got a lot of work to do. And hopefully each of us, and I know we do this at Spiff, where we do a lot of internal surveys. And I could tell you there's some pretty hard hitting feedback that I've had, that I've had to internalize and of course correct. And so, look, this is hard. What we all do is hard, and we're all in this together. And I think if there's a collaborative spirit and approach, I think it just tends to help generally move in the direction where everyone's singing from the same sheet of music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're right about us being in this together. That's like, we have to just kind of all accept that and see how we can be a team in getting through those things. Something that was helpful on my end, I'm not sure when you do OKRs with your team, if you kind of set the OKR and figure out a way for the team to meet them, or if you let the team set them. But on our end, we are, as sales reps, we set our OKRs. We pick 5, and some of them address things like burnout, or improving the work environment, or improving the work-life balance, or things like professional goals, not just specific sales goals. And we also, of course, get the sales goals in there, but giving the sales reps the power to really pick what is valuable was impactful, because of course we can rework them together and create everything so that it also reaches company goals. But it showed me that my leader, my boss, my company, they care about my personal goals as well in my career and just my life in general. So
yeah, I think goal setting in general, and it's interesting, our executive team, they were clear on expectations on what we as a company are going to do, and our goals are always a stretch goal, and I don't think there's any expectation that we're going to hit them 100% of the time. But studies have shown that if you have stretch goals that are really ambitious, it actually adds to the motivation and the ambition that actually intrinsically happens as a result of it. So, and at Spiff, we intentionally have super aggressive goals because we know we probably won't hit them all, but definitely we're all beating to the same drum, and typically moves in a way that everyone moves in the direction that we identify.
So let me hop in here real quick. Because this is leading to me to an interesting thought, and I love the group's thoughts here. At least for me, unfortunately, I am not a stranger to burnout. I tend to burn myself out, usually a few times a year, right? That's just how I run myself. The burnout that I had before this remote world versus the burnout I have now whenever I hit it is very different, right? It's the way that you react to it is very different. How you can cope with it is very different. I think and I maybe I'm alone there, but I have a feeling I'm not. And so would be curious, A, if you guys agree with that, and 2, how that's played into how you've changed your goal setting over the past year or 2, and what you're learning around what was maybe a good goal or a reasonable way to set a goal pre-pandemic and pre-remote work environment versus now where we're in it. So Madison, I'll maybe kick it to you.
Yeah, the burnout's definitely different. And I think the main thing that I've really changed is I now have a stronger emphasis on relational goals, and also learning learning in a non-traditional format. So growth is one of my values, and it's also one of my motivators. If I'm growing and I'm learning something new, I'm stoked on life. And when I was in the office, it was really easy to just learn by osmosis. You just absorb things. But when we're not in the office, I'm really just narrow focused on a screen all day. I'm not engaging. I'm not communicating with friends or peers. So now I have very specifically started implementing goals like having lunch with executive leaders outside of my organization, or joining I'm in an organization called Women in Revenue. And so I have a goal to have X number of conversations with new members of this organization every quarter, every month. And, joining a Toastmasters something so that I can get out, meet new people, learn, grow, and expand my mind. And these are part of my company OKRs because it contributes to my growth, my learning. It, tickles my social itch. And it's just a really good way for me to be stimulated other than just at a computer screen. So those are some examples of how I've changed my goals, whereas before I didn't even consider those things.
So that's actually really cool. So your company, some of your company OKRs, like your OKRs at work, are actually related to somebody's personal, probably more now than they would have been previously, it sounds like.
100%. I have 5 key OKRs. 2 of them are directly sales revenue related, like, relating to ARR, relating to average contract value, relating to referrals or partner deals, etc. But the other 3 OKRs are more about like leadership and professional presence, learning. And then the 5th is related to like communication and relationships, but in my organization. So knowledge sharing and things like that. But
Love that. That's awesome. That's
yeah.
really, really cool. And so Stan, before I toss the same question to you, because I'm interested from your perspective, how you're setting things different from your team. Zach asked a really interesting question here in the chat that I want to kind of to sandwich in on this, which is how are you incorporating rep feedback as part of this process as well, right? So as you're setting goals. So how is that just the general goal setting changed? OKR philosophy changed for you and on your team, and how are you including reps more or less in that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's an area that is always an improvement that I need to make and have continually focused on. It's not something I've been great at overall, but it is something that is like the communication or the over communication is something that I think about all the time. So an example of that, when it comes to goal setting, a lot of our OKRs from the revenue side is very much metric driven, revenue driven, win rate driven, and so forth. And frankly, we need to parlay that with additional goals that kind of speak to what Madison was talking about. We just haven't gotten to that point. But personally, I have similar goals that Madison did, just a little different. But I think just generally, I'll maybe come back to your question. But when I think of personal goals, we should all be thinking about engagement. Like, how do we engage? How do we connect with people? That's a little different. Some folks like to get out, some don't. And it's just being able to find a path to continue that opportunity, because it's really key. The second thing that Madison brought up that stood out to me is there's so much tribal knowledge, and you can absorb that when you're in the office, and you don't absorb that when you're not. And so as a company, our goals, when we come, I think sales enablement is one of the biggest focus areas for us this year. How do we set an OKR or goal around that to allow reps to absorb it in the way they learn? That's a real challenge. And so we're really thinking through how do we better enable the team, and got a good set of resources internally, but we're trying to figure out how to create a consistent, approachable, process and set goals to allow the reps to ramp in a way that they sponge and learn. And so that's going to be a constant iteration for me, and certainly with the team, and being able to set the goals and objectives, because it all, I guess, correlates and directly attacks the revenue challenge. But just the personal development, that's just, again, going back to that, it's something that we need to do better with. And we're going to get into technology in a little bit, but we do have certain tech stacks that we've added that allow me to have conversation in one-on-ones and in team meetings to talk more about personal development and things that may not be directly related to revenue. And that's certainly an area that I've been focusing a lot more on. Did I directly answer or indirectly or not answer? I
think we got it. No, I appreciate that, Stan. I mean, having seen that firsthand at Spiff, I think it's definitely been a learning experience for all of us. I'm having some good and some bad flashbacks to kind of the early days of COVID, and remembering learning some of these lessons. So, and I'm sure you guys are as well. I would like us to kind of shift the combo just a little bit in a direction I think will be really beneficial to all of us. But before I do, I actually love this question that Matthew asked, which is how do you ensure reps who join a 100% remote company feel included as employees from back in the office days? So I'll just leave that open to kind of whoever wants to take a stab at it first, but curious on what your guys' thoughts are.
Yeah, let me try to attack that first. Just from my perspective, I think you have to have a vision that you can position and just make sure everything's aligned to. And then when you hire, when you train, when you set goals, like everything's, aligned to what that vision is. And I think the second part of that, which is really 1A and 1B to me at least, is just the constant communication on what that vision is and how everything aligns to it. And then being able to have consistency, talking through this with, and I think consistency is really key. And what I mean by that is, for me, it's consistent one-on-ones and maybe even consistent topics, things that they care about that we can address and see how we're improving, team meetings, brown bags, whatever we're doing on the enablement side. But I do think, consistency is really important. And then having those kind of informal moments too is really important. Whether it's you're having send a certificate for coffee, and you just get on a Zoom with someone and you just kind of chew the fat a little bit and have a conversation. So there's inclusion from that perspective. Who knows what we're going to look like a year from now, but I can tell you I've had to make a much more concerted effort and still need to do a much better job of engaging in the way that my reps want to be engaged.
Yeah, I think that's also, so Stan, you're a leader, you choose to do that with your team. And also, if you were to encourage your other team members to be leaders in a similar way as you're setting the example, then they would feel more comfortable to reach out to the team and collaborate and be connected more. I've had leaders, not just at GetAccept, but other places, if I ask them a question, they encourage me to go ask another teammate. So it shows me that I can openly communicate with people throughout the entire company. And then that helps me build alliances, and it helps me become a resource to another person and then become a resource to me as well.
Yeah, no, I think it's one thing I would just add on this, and then I will kind of help us shift just a little bit, is I would highly suggest, and I don't know if you guys agree with me on this, but keep a budget to bring people into the office. That's the one thing I would say, like whether it's a regional office or something. I know here at Spiff, we've made a pretty concerted effort to keep our office spend low. So we're okay to swallow more travel spend. And I just think it's made a world of difference for us too. So I would, again, every situation is different. Every company is going to be a little different, but I would highly suggest finding ways to get together, at least with people in your region, so that you still have some of that social interaction. I at least know for me, it's healthy. So this, like kind of, not switching gears, but just kind of transitioning. We're talking a lot around kind of this change. One of the things I think that's been interesting, at least for me, with going to a remote environment, is my old routine was like, wake up, get excited for work. I'd usually listen to a podcast on the way to work. I work hard at work, and on the drive home, I would not listen to a podcast. I'd kind of unwind, and then I'd check back out, right? But with there being like enough focus time at work, when I was setting goals, it tended to be easier for me to like remember those goals, right? Kind of set myself up for those goals as I got ready for the day. Where now, like I walk to my basement and open up this door right here, and I'm at work. Well, work doesn't really ever leave. Work sometimes happens upstairs too, but I'm curious on how you guys are either setting goals and kind of keeping them top of mind, or how you're making sure that you're kind of having those SMART goals, and how you're holding yourself or your teams accountable to those. So Madison, we'll kick it to you and get your thoughts there.
Yeah, so how I'm setting SMART goals and how to stay accountable.
Yeah, so just like how you're, sorry, I broke the number one rule. You're not supposed to sandwich questions on there. Just how are you like making sure you're holding yourself accountable in just a different environment?
Yeah, I always kind of redo iterations of this, and my most recent iteration for accountability routine is I set at the end of every month, I set a task or a time in my calendar to review the month prior. And I, in the calendar event, have an agenda where I list out every, key metric that I wanted to hit. And I take, whatever amount of time it takes to reflect on the prior month. I also have a coworker friend, and we do check-ins like every other month. We share our goals. We do that. My boss, the leaders of the company, they're so busy with their metrics as well. So I rely a lot on my colleagues in the short term, and then in the long term, do those big reflections and, the pivots with my actual leader. But for myself, I journal a lot, I reflect a lot, and write it down. And then I'm not too hard on myself when I miss the mark. Like, just the fact that I'm continuously bringing my attention to the fact that I have a goal is a win in my book. And I've had to practice that, like, self-compassion a lot. It's kind of cheesy, but really does make a big difference.
I need to try to steal some of that from you. That's awesome that you're able to do that. I know that's as I've talked with friends and family going through the same thing, the ones who are able to kind of nail down that tend to be the happiest, right? So thank you so much for sharing it. Stan, would love kind of like for your response here to be, how are you contributing to your team? There's a nice balance between accountability and pushing towards burnout, right? And I personally think it's even harder when you're not in the office there. Like, if I send someone a Slack and it's like, hey, you're below quota, what's going on? Like, you might be meaning that in like the most sincere, genuine way ever, but it's coming through Slack, right? Or it's coming over at Zoom. Like, how are you combating that and kind of adjusting with that over in this environment?
Yeah, I think for me, if I'm doing it right, they're bringing this up to me. Like, hey, I'm not meeting expectations because I'm not having X amount of conversations, or I'm not having X amount of meetings, which get me to the revenue number. Because really, if we think about it, and this should be an exercise for all of us, whether you're a leader or a rep or whatever role you're in, it's, what does success look like? How are we defining it? And so when I think about what I'm trying to do for 2022, that's different from last year, I think I need to do a better job selling the vision and in defining the purpose and what success is. And I think we've done a much better job at it this year. And it's more than just, hey, you've got to hit 100 million, right? We need to back into that. And we need to understand what are the factors that go into it. And then we need to go not just from a leader, like a revenue lead, like a CRO perspective, to then a team lead perspective or a manager perspective, and then to an individual contributor perspective. What does success look like? And that's something that we're rolling out now and we'll continue to iterate on. But I do think having purpose and defining it is super important to align everybody to the strategy. And then when we're clear about that, we make it visible. Like, I am a big believer, like, once you have that in place, like, throw it out to the wild, not just to everyone, but within its Spiff specifically, and let all departments know what we're doing and make it super visible. Are we hitting our objectives and in our goals, or are we not? And again, sales, the one thing I love about it, for good or for bad, there's always a report card. If you're hitting it or you're not. And usually there's some in between, but generally it's yes or no. And so for me, it's kind of like, Madison hit this. It's like I could lose a few LBs. And I think to do that, for me, I want everyone to know about it because I want them to hold me accountable. And so very similar, at least from my perspective, is let everybody know, let the whole department know, let everyone have it visible and transparent. Put your dashboards out there in the office, or have your dashboards, because we're remote, in a way where they can be in a distribution or in Slack or wherever you put it. Mm-hmm. And then once you have your metrics and your goals in place, there's always a constant inspection of it. Are we tracking? And if I do it right, or if we do it right, reps are coming to the leader or the leader to me and say, hey, we're really struggling. We're not getting enough meetings to be able to hit our revenue goals, or I'm not having as many conversations because I'm not getting the meetings I need to hit my revenue goals. And then we got to be flexible and iterate based on what we're seeing. And that is from my perspective, at an individual contributor perspective, a team perspective, and it's very tailored to each bucket. And so, that's how I look at it. And again, if I do my job right, which hopefully I'll be better this year, those will be more engaging conversations, because the one thing I love about what I just talked about, the data is not emotional. These are facts. People know what their objectives are, and we can have a more kind of calm and just straightforward conversation on what we need to do to course correct, because every rep has a different set of needs.
Yeah, it's like back in the day in the office when you'd write that you do the tick marks on the whiteboard when people made calls or got meetings booked and deals closed, and we can't really do that anymore. So it takes effort to share and be transparent about all of those things.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that I noticed is I underestimated how much accountability, goal setting, and just like culture happened at the water cooler for us at the foosball table, right? Like it was something that like you kind of took for granted because it happened so casually. Like again, for us in the early days of Spiff, foosball was a big thing, and a lot of the times like that's when I had some of my best conversations with people afterwards. What's you go for a second, you chat, and then it like opened up the door really well for you to be very transparent and open around a concern, a thought, a question. It just kind of broke down some barriers there. And I think one thing that I learned from this, and then a trend I've noticed, is like transparency in your tech stack that your employees are now using has to somehow kind of replace that, right? Like I'm just over the last couple of years, it just seems like that you can no longer get away with keeping some of these numbers or some of these performances or other people, even other team members' goals and performances hidden from each other, because we just don't have that natural water cooler effect as much. And so Stan, I mean, as you're thinking about this, talk to me about how you guys are using your tech stack to try to go there. And then we've got about 5 more minutes and I want to open up for questions. So we'll just love kind of if each of you wants to take a stab at this, and then we'll roll into questions and then last thoughts there.
I'll rattle, so cut me off, Madison, when I hit my 2-minute mark. I guess 2-minute, 30-second mark. Yeah, I love this discussion. I actually was reading one of GetAccept's, I think it was a survey you guys had, where it was for 67% of the companies that you surveyed had 4 to 10, software packages to help enable sales. Like I could be wrong in my memory of that. Is that right, Madison?
Yeah, it's right about there. Yep.
So I think tech has a big part in operationalize and driving efficiency, but I can also tell you, I have the equal thought about anything additional that we bring on. And I think there are a couple Spiff folks here on the call that understand kind of my sentiment on it, because, I'm not going to bring on anything that doesn't add value to a rep. And it's got to be able to draw out efficiency. Like I think we're actually over 10. I could be wrong, but I think we're using technology, and are we optimizing it? And is it adding value to the rep and to the organization? And is it doing it in a way that it's driving the outcome that we're looking for? So I think equally as, I would want it to add value to the org as the tech stack or the technology, providing it in a way where it allows a rep to be as effective as possible. So I would just maybe leave it with these 2 things. One is my job is to add value to that person, that rep, that leader, and just help them clear out the obstacles and be an extension of their success. And then second is, as a result of that, I want to make sure what we're putting in front of them is adding that value to that primary goal. And sometimes reps may not see the light at the end of the tunnel, just because maybe I have some experience where I'm like, okay, just lean in a little bit. It will result. I promise. Just trust it. Lean into it. And sometimes there's a little bit of a pull there, and that's okay. But if the vision's being sold, it will eventually get to a point where we're all singing from the same sheet of music. So I think those are the kind of 2 thoughts right away that I think about when it comes to tech. Is it adding value?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in not having too much tech, which is just a really delicate balance and sometimes controversial because we work in tech, but tech should increase efficiency, not create more problems. And with a lot of sales tools, like every time a tool dings or sends a notification, it's a distraction. So the distraction should be motivating and should keep us on track and focused on the right things, not distracting and taking us on tangents or creating more admin tasks for us. So I think less is more, but also it's really important that you're picking the right tools if you do have less of them. So that's really just my summary on that topic. I don't know if there's any other specific question around
Yeah,
that.
I would just add to that, because Madison, you sparked just one other thought here, and that is if the tech or whatever package that you're bringing into your organization, like if we think about it, like again, the only example that came up is a lot of the HR, great HR programs out there, but what is that doing? It's allowing us to be more efficient, and it's allowing us to streamline processes. But what's missing? Sometimes it's the human element, because it's streamlining, and that exasperates in many cases the human element in the whole issue that we talked about in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, what is that balance? And that makes it even more important for leaders and us as individuals in the organization to make sure that that connection happens and make it a priority. Because if we don't, we'll get lost. And that contributes to burnout.
Yeah. One final thought, one of my old leaders, our VP of growth, DW, he used to tell me, like, a computer should not be able to do what you're doing better. And if it can, let the computer do it. And so in external, relations and external with clients, it's like, let the tech do the things that it's better off doing so that we as humans can focus on the human part.
Yep. Yeah. Love that.
That's awesome. I love DW. Never mind. Well, we can chat about that later. But it's awesome guy.
Story for another day.
Yeah, but no, I think one of the things that's the coolest, one of the things that's the most like fun for me to watch, just to kind of like finish off this thought here, is this. There's been a really cool trend in tech since we've gone to more remote force, and it's the consumerization of enterprise tech, right? So things that inherently before didn't have to be as user friendly because you were like either in the office, people could work through it, managers were sitting right next to you and could walk you through it pretty much at like a snap of a finger. That's not possible anymore. Like if you can't use your app on your computer, it's essentially worthless to your rep, because it's not worthless, sorry, but it's a time suck now. So it doesn't, like you said, it's not an efficiency builder. It's efficiency or focus killer. And so it's been fun to see, whether it was an app that was around before or like the pop-up of what's coming up, what's new, just how much more focus there is on like all users, right? A lot of the times there's a lot of focus on a user, like an admin. And then there was kind of an afterthought. I mean, that's a little overstating it, but generally speaking, there wasn't as much focus on that, where I think it's actually switching. It's been a lot of fun to watch. And I think if you're not adding transparency to your team, it's just not acceptable. I think people will leave. I think that's also what we're seeing with some of this great resignation, is the tech stack that you have and how you manage it can drive retention. Yeah. So awesome, guys. Well, we've got 2 questions here. So before we finish this off, and if anyone else has any other questions, we've got a few minutes here, and maybe we'll just go like a minute or 2 over. But the first one is, and Madison, I'll ask you this one. How do you bring the "we're in this together" mentality into the goal setting transparency talk around the team?
Yeah, there's a few components in that question. I'm trying to break it down here. Into the goal setting and transparency talk around attainment. I think, Stan, you really hit on this earlier. It's like the sharing component and the transparency component. And then I think, for example, if I have this goal and I'm, I have to close X number of dollars in ARR this month, for instance, or I need 3 referral conversations this week. And if I feel like I'm not hitting that and I'm intimidated by that goal in some way, having that posted somewhere, or having a team member that I can share that with and a leader that is also willing to communicate about it with me, that's definitely huge. But if it's hidden somewhere in a sheet, or if it's never talked about, and if I don't feel comfortable talking about it because there's a culture of like competition that's just in some way toxic, it's like we're never going to be able to work together. And then secondly, I just try to practice what I preach. Like I'm just generally like a come on team, let's do it person. And so I extend myself in that way to my team members. And then I think that it sets a good example. And so maybe part of this is about hiring the right people and having culture goals and making sure that everyone in the team is aligned with that.
Yeah, I'm such a big believer with you that, like, even though it's harder now, the team mentality is still necessary for survival, right? If you don't have that, I think you'll just see high attrition. Yeah. So Stan, I'll kick this next one to you here. So how are you factoring external variables like buyer behavior into your team's goal setting?
Yeah, I'd have to think about that one a little bit, but we're always iterating. And I guess when you initially asked that question, I couldn't not help think about the ICP, or ideal customer profile, because that's always iterating, and we're taking that feedback as we see it in the sales motion. So those external factors, certainly play into, I mean, I think about external factors in general could be different things. And I'm just thinking through, an individual contributor who's dealing with an external factor of a divorce or a health issue or something. How does that play into what, we need to do as an organization to help support them? There's the external factor of a deal. Every deal that we have, which is not going to be unique to Spiff, but it's a white canvas. And how do you treat that opportunity in a way where you can still go through a sales motion and address the objections or scenarios that come up that are external facing that may be a surprise, may not. But if I would just say, I'm just going to go back to my comment earlier. If we're all singing from the same sheet of music and we're all aligned with what the goal and the success looks like, I think we're all going to be hit with all sorts of circumstances. And I think we just need the North Star, so to speak, to be able to align to it. Because when they do hit, and they will, we can revert back to it and see how we can help the rep or the team or the organization hit their goals and objectives. And so, I just treat it like if you haven't, I'm trying to think of the book, I'm gonna totally butcher it. I'm just gonna stop. How about that?
I have, if I may, I have a small
Yeah,
thing
of course.
on that. One of the metrics we look at in goal setting related to external buyer behavior is quality engagements. So like, are all of the deals that I'm starting, are they going flat after the first meeting? One thing that I can look to improve is after the first meeting, how many more engagements do I have before maybe it's lost? Because increasing engagement and quality engagement and touch points, that is a metric that's leading me closer to closing the deal. Because if I'm having a demo meeting and then they go dark, it means that there's nothing to nurture towards. So that we put metrics like that, quality engagements after first meeting or number of quality engagements per deal. We put that into our OKRs as like key metrics to look for.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, Madison, separately. So look forward to that conversation. Yeah, we've been
Awesome.
thinking about it in a similar way, but a little different. We're a little bit less mature in our metrics on engagement, but we're looking at things like buying signals, like what are we seeing, and that should convert eventually into engagement metrics. But that'd be really cool to hear more about that.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome, guys. We are unfortunately kind of coming up on time. One thing I want to make sure we do before we go, though, 30 seconds each. Key takeaway. What's the one thing you hope someone takes away from our call today? Stan, we'll start with you. We'll save the best for last with Madison.
Oh,
If you don't know what success is, work with your team to define it.
that's good.
Short and sweet. Love it.
You had that one written down already.
I don't know.
It's on his forearm right there.
He's got it tattooed or something. Yeah, I'd say definitely some themes, which is transparency, quality communication, and collaboration, like collaboration internally and collaboration externally. I think that those themes and those values are really going to take a remote team very far towards, hitting their sales goals and also feeling like they're fulfilled personally.
Awesome. Well, Madison, Stan, thank you so much for joining on this today. I love the conversation, and we're having a lot of great things said here in the chat as well. So I appreciate you taking the time. We got this dropped in here, but guys, please connect with us on LinkedIn. If you have other questions, please reach out. I know all of us here are happy to chat and just would love to follow you and get to know you better as well. So again, thanks so much for having us. Again, thanks to Spiff and GetAccept for getting this put together for us. And please keep an eye out for more of these. We both groups are trying to put out some great content to hopefully help you and we can all learn from each other. So again, thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Fun. Bye.